Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you, and today we're going to be taking a look at the very glossy tempered glass Anidees Crystal. And now we're actually filming, I'm starting to think that with all this darkness and glossiness and shininess and reflectiveness, it's probably a really bad idea that for once I've actually worn a white t-shirt. But fun times could be ahead. We're going to be taking a look at this £129 case today. I apologise if you see the camera wobble, but I've got my tripod up so high so that we can see on top of this. It's really not a good idea me having such a high desk anymore. Anyway, we have a switch here for the fans, and it's a three-way switch. You've got H on one side, B in the middle, and then L on the other side. And I will show you the difference between these when we get down near the front and we start looking at lights and stuff. Then we have a microphone and a headphone port, have a power and a reset button. You've got a little white ring around the outside that lights up, but then you've got a textured aluminium top. Then we have two USB 2s on the far right, and then two USB 2s here. This is a magnetic mesh section, which if I remove, it's just a hexagon mesh underneath. Now, I will show you this in a little bit more detail from the other side, but you've essentially got mounts there, elongated mounts, so that you can fit a whole range of radiators or fans in the top, depending on which ones you wanted. But essentially, it's a 240, 280, 360, so up to 360 and 280, and then anything in between with all the little variants and stuff like that. Straight head on, what we can see is the lovely glass front, and I do like a bit of glass. It's 5mm tempered glass. You've got glass on the front, you've got glass on the back, and you've got glass on the side. The vents down this side, honestly, the best way I can explain those vents is fractal define S, and I'm going to save what I actually want to say now for the conclusion. But so the little red LED that you can see up here is actually the PCI poster on the motherboard. Now, I will show you later on, but there is kind of a fan hub on the inside, which is what's connected to the adjuster at the top. Now, you'd think that it'd be slow and fast, and it would be. And you'd also think that now, I mean, what we can do is you can see nice dim lights, and that's on the far left-hand side of the switch. If you click it right the way across again, they go brighter. But the confusing thing is, what they also do is that's the fast fan setting, which is the brightest mode, and on the other side that's the low fan setting, and in the middle that not only turns the lights off, but it turns the fans off as well. So the fans are not PWM, and you can disable them entirely if you want. Now, if you're looking for a really silent rig, that could be great. You know, your graphics card could go into a low power mode and then go really quiet, and you only have the CPU spinning. So you know, it could be a good thing, but I'm certainly not used to many, if any, people wanting to disable their fans altogether. And it's much more disappointing that that's not a light switch, so that you've got a low light, a high light, and off, and then the fans are adjusted from some other manner. But when we go past that little quibble, there is a dust filter on the underside of the case that we can see here. Again, it's magnetic. It is kind of basic like the top one, but it will get the job done. And we've got the inside now. No, I should really turn the lights back on, shouldn't I? So we have the front panel, and you have a little recess, kind of like you can see the little box around the inside, and the fans do sit back from this, but it's just so that you've got kind of like a black area and you can't see out the sides, because when it's on, you don't really get a chance to see through the glass and out the side. So it's just to give that kind of optical illusion. Airflow in the front is pretty good. It's not epic because of that shroud, and it just means that the air's got to go all over the place. The fans, I would say, when they're in the high mode, they're not particularly quiet, but they're not offensive. When they're in the low mode, it's pretty damn quiet, but the airflow drops because of the fact that you've spanned them down so much as well. Around the back of the case, what we do have at the top is a mount which comes with a 140mm fan. The fans in the front are actually all 140s as well. but it's an adjustable fan that you can move up and down with the elongated mounts, and you can put a 120 in there should you wish. The back feels very, very flat. You know, with some cases you get the little recesses where the graphics card goes in, and you've got a recess where the motherboard bit is, you know, slightly. Everything on this is pretty much straight flat at the back, including, because of that, what it does mean is you've got a little slider here for the access to your IOs at the back, or I call them PCI slots, and the mounts for those are actually at the back, you know, and stuck out. So when you get your screwdriver, you don't need them on the inside. The screws are actually all out here. Finally, right at the very bottom, we do have a dust filter for the power supply. It's one of the few times where you can't really see it, as you'll see in a minute. It's one of the times where you are going to actually want the power supply pulling air from the bottom, because that's the thing that you need to remember. It doesn't pull air in through the back, it actually pulls air in through the fan. So the back of the power supply is the exhaust. A lot of confusion with that. Leave the side panel on for a second. You can get a rough view of what's going on inside it anyway, but you do have 4 screws to mount the tempered glass window on with. If you do buy this case, I would advise both removing and fitting the screws for the window, especially the back panel, with it laid sideways like this, because there's not an immense amount of room for cabling on the other side, and it will just give you a much better chance of being able to get the screws that you need to put the side panel on with in square without cross-threading them, and it'll also stop the fact that when you're trying to put it on, it's going to be wobbling all over the place. And it stops you that chance of it actually being able to fall off the case. So whereas with our old side panels, the steel and alley ones, where you can just kind of slide them on, it'll be much safer for you with these to go with the stick it on its side and put it on basically. Now, when we do talk about this, on this side, there isn't an actual great deal of room for cabling. You're looking in total at about 12 millimeters. So our problem here was the braided cables that we've got with the 24 pin, the 8 pin and the PCI Express. Now I had wedged them down as much as I possibly could do, but there just wasn't enough room, and that was why we did manage to get the side panel on, but there was always that little pivot on it just in the middle. Now, looking sideways on, we've got these access holes here for your cables, but because of the way that it is built, you've got a nice recess all the way down the bottom and up the top. It's probably going to be more advisable for your 24 pin and your PCI Express to come right up this side and actually go in that way. I've done it the more generic way just to be able to show you that the window was a little bit wobbly, but that is the way to be able to get around it. You can already see that there are some Velcro tabs down the side which keep all the cables from the front panel in. That's your fans in there, your USB 3, your front panel switches, all that type of stuff. It's all down here. Up here we do have what I told you was the fan hub. Now with the fan hub you have a little power here, which is the one at the bottom. That's how it gets fed its power. And then you've got the other switches, so that we've got the 3 front panel fans, and I actually plugged in the rear fan as well. There's another one that you can fit in the top. Thing to remember with that is it's not connected to the motherboard in any way. It's not a PWM splitter or hub, which is a shame, because if it was, it would be brilliant. And if it was a PWM hub, I'm pretty sure there would have been a way that we could have turned the lights off. I don't know. I'm not that technical mumbo jumbo with all this sort of stuff. But anyway, it would have been nice if it was PWM as well. Or you had like an override. I don't know. I'm sure they could have done something. Beyond that, we have a reasonable cutout area, but it does seem to fall quite short. I would say that it probably needs to be another 10 millimeters maybe wider to be able to fit with a wider range of motherboards. As with this one, it's not too bad. If you had some Z170 ones in, I think you would have ended up coming into a little bit of problems with it. Just to kind of give you an idea, this is where the final screws for the motherboard are. So you can see we've got that amount of area there. That's kind of dead space. Now I know you are going to have your memory, but it's just CPU sockets nowadays with the big back plates and stuff, it could end up causing you some problems. One of the other things I will say as well, when we do get round to the other side, I'm going to talk to you about this dead area here. So I'm just showing it to you while we're around the back and you can see what I'm on about. Otherwise, for cable routing, you've got one up here, you've got another one here, and then you've got a double length one compared to the others here. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for the back. Maybe not pretty much it. I did forget to draw attention to down here, there are two mounts for optical base for mechanical hard drives. You can put solid state drives in there as well if you want. You've obviously got three mounts up here for SSDs, but there are two 3.5-inch mounts down here. You can remove one side of the mechanical bay so that you can remove the sliders, but this side can't be. It'll make more sense when we get the other side, but most important thing, mechanical 3.5-inch drives, there's two bays for them there at the bottom, at the front. Okay, so when we get to the business side of the case, we have some the three 140s in the front, and it's all kind of set up pretty well, apart from a couple of little things which I am going to have to get really nitty-gritty with and talk to you about. So we have the power supply cover area here, and there are a couple of screws where you can unscrew that, and that's how you take the other side of the bay for the 3.5 inches out. Just so that you know. This side here is the other side of the bay, which is actually fixed. It's part of the power supply cover, just so that you're aware, so you can't get it off. When we talk about the roof, as I've shown you before, there is room up there for 240, 280 and 360mm radiators, and above the motherboard you're looking at a maximum total of 60mm of room. So that's 60mm of room for the radiator and your fans. Keep in mind that your fans are going to be 25mm thick, so you can do the maths. You're looking at 30 to 35mm of thickness for the radiator. It's a maximum of that thickness as well, because they are not offset or anything like that, so they are sat directly in the middle, so that you're not going to be able to get any extra thickness, because the radiator and fans will end up coming down on the 8-pin on the top of your motherboard, and you know, eventually like the memory and stuff as well. It's taken me an age to get the camera to show this little indentation where it comes in slightly into the case, and the reason that I'm showing you that is because, well, of this. I've looked everywhere for a tape measure where this would be the right way up, so you're just going to have to bear with me. Now, the distance between the edge of the fan and the edge of this mount here is about 38mm, 39 an absolute push. Now, the problem is that little recess that I showed you, that little tiny thing, is actually 2mm. Point is that if you really wanted to, and that little recess wasn't here, you could have put a 40mm thick radiator in here, but because of that, you're then going to be instantly reduced to only being able to get a maximum thickness of 30mm in. Now, there's enough vents down here that you could have done, and it's just, I just think that it's a little bit of a shame, because it just means that extra couple of millimeters would have opened up a whole other range of radiators, because they generally are going to end up being 30mm and then up to 40mm thicknesses. So they've kind of restricted it in a way there. It's pretty nitty gritty. But anyway, again, radiators in the front, 280, 360, 240, any of those kind of you know, differences between them. Just a quick look at the front from this angle, just so that you can see you've got your bottom 140mm fan, and you can see where it lines up with the motherboard, and then you've got the top two. So if you were thinking about, oh, I can put a 240 or a 280 in the front, you'll have a decent idea. It does also mean that if you were thinking to yourself, oh, I can run two radiators, to be honest with you, it's a no straight out the box. Well, two 360s would be a no. You could get away with a 360 and a 240 or a 280. Yes, that would be possible. But you're going to need a little bit of room somewhere for the radiator to go in one way or another. So you just need to keep that in mind. When I spoke to you about the dead area up here before, this was the bit that I'm going to be drawing attention to. So when I was sticking my hands through the side, That's this little indentation here, which sits just in front of the fans. It does actually line up perfectly with the edge of the power supply cover as well. So if you did have a thick radiator, it literally would sit in line with this. This is a little cover for the cables, and it only covers this section, and I personally think it should have gone right the way up to the top, because not all motherboards have low 24 pins. You can also see how much of a pull I've got on this one. One thing I will say though is we are running, because that is where the mount is, we are running an E80X board. So the E80X just means it's a little bit wider. So we're right up to the end here, you can fit it. If you've got a normal ATX board, your power supply, 24 pins, going to be a bit further in, it'll be easier to manage. It does mean that you can see here the SATAs. You can still use all these SATAs, it does line up kind of nice. I just think this should have been right the way to the top, just so that it would have made things, you know, kind of match, and I think it would have made it look a bit nicer. But this does end up being a bit of a pain in the bottom. If you've got long graphics cards as well, it's probably going to end up being a bane in your rear end. You'll probably end up getting a Dremel to bits of plastic or files or something. But it does look better with it on. So if you do end up getting it and it doesn't quite fit with your graphics card or something, do persevere and try and mod it in some way. So yeah, there is that. Nice view that we've got from here that I can show you is you've got a nice direct way down with your PCI Express cables should you want. I'm still a bit of a fan of doing it the old school way, but I know a lot of you like to go with them straight down, which does mean even if you've got a massive power supply, you can drop them straight down in. That is the only real way through from this section though. There is a tiny little way through at the back here which might be able to get up for your front panel audio connector or something, but on this board, for example, if I wanted to put the two USBs through, say for argument's sake I had like link stuff with Corsair, they would either have to come up this way and drag along the bottom or go along there. I personally think that this could have been a bit shorter considering what it was for, and you should have had some extra cutout areas along the back to have had that put through. But again, if you do get this and you end up turning it into a bit of a project, it's a 5-minute job with a Dremel. Just put the motherboard in, mark it up with some masking tape, like put the masking tape down beforehand, draw some pencil lines in, and then get in there and get busy. It's just a shame it wasn't like it straight out of the box. Straight, clean, side-on view, just for you to be able to see it, is actually a very clean and crisp look in that it's kind of all open. I know I've not got a lot in it, and it's not very often I use an air cooler either, but it's this white Matterhorn that we've got that's going to be coming up in a review later on. I just love it. So I left that in there. So you can see you've got acres of room up here for graphics cards, loads of room around the top. It does mean that you could squeeze a fair bit of kit in. There's obviously plenty of room above so that you can get your AIO in there should you want. You could put a 360 AIO in there. There are some around now. Water cooling radiators. If you were going to be thinking about like water cooling, you could put the pump underneath here where your mechanicals are to get it out of the way, and you would have an access point up through here. Or if you really had to, you could have it mounted on the top here, and you could have your reservoir up here, radiator in the front. There's a few options for you there as well. Okay then, it's been a while since I've done a case, and it's actually been really nice. Building it was quite therapeutic as well. Award right from the very get-go is the OC3D Exceptional Aesthetics. Ding, fonts. Right, so basically, and I've been itching to say this, and I don't know how I've not let this out throughout the whole of the review, but the Crystal, I think, is the love child of the Inwin 805 and the Fractal Define S. I can see certain aspects from both. The glass is essentially the 805. Now, with the 805, you obviously couldn't see the fans and stuff on the inside. And the Inwin 805, the airflow pattern was a bit kind of distorted. So this way is much better. And the grills on the side, that's the only real bit that I get from the Fractal. Well, other than the fact that you've got a 360 in the roof and in front. But that meshed kind of design, top to bottom on the front, is where the additional airflow comes from. The motherboard tray on this makes a lot more sense than the 805 as well, because the 805 just had squares and stuff all over the place. It was like some weird modern art thing. It looked like it needed to have like coloured bits of glass behind all the random holes that were all over the place. This, you can see there's a little bit more thought gone into it. I still think they should have had an extra one up the side of the motherboard at the top, which I showed you quite clearly. And I think that that's really the bit that would really make the motherboard tray on this that little bit better. Also, I think it does need some more grommet holes down at the bottom, but they're very, like, I say minor niggly things, but to be honest with you, they're just the things that kind of spoil it, because in all honesty, this came quite close to me like really liking it. And it's just a shame that it kind of feels, they've obviously learned a lot because they've been making a few cases. They've obviously taken some styling kind of accents from other brands, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because you can't say it's a rip-off of one or the other. Like you know, some are just so blatantly copied from other cases. This, you can just see that there's some similarities, and I can live with that. But they did need to spend a little bit more time with it, trying to perfect certain details. Like I said, there's just a few things that have not quite been missed. So the aesthetic side of it, to be honest with you, glass is a hot topic at the moment, and for £129 it delivers really well. I would go as far as to say this really does put the Inwin 805 in the shade now, and I was a big fan of the Inwin 805. That really kind of won me over with the fact that it did look so nice, even though the motherboard tray was retarded. So what Anidees have done is they've refined their version of it, but it's still not quite there. So to be honest with you, we get an Inwin 805 V2 come out and they sort it all out, then it could, you know what I mean, there's a bit of a battle going on. But I do really like it. It's an incredibly pretty case. It was a bit of a toss-up in the end, whether we went with like an enthusiast choice, because I personally think that it needs a bit of work doing to it. It's the type of case that you buy brand new and you start test fitting stuff, and then the Dremel comes out and the drill comes out, and you really, you start to perfect it yourself to perfectly suit what you're going to put inside it. But we went with aesthetics in the end, because we know that the majority of you are going to buy it, fall in love with the glass, and then build something nice inside. One thing I would say is strategic lighting in this, because of the tinted glass windows, is key. And if you do it right, it can look amazing. I was just loosely clipping in magnetic white LEDs the other day just to have a play through, and it looks spot on. The only other thing that I would say is the front panel thing, where you can actually disable the fans altogether. I can see that being great for somebody that leaves their system on all the time and like, oh, I'm going to bed now, and you flick it off. Especially with the newer generation of graphics cards, where when it's sat at idle, the graphics cards literally, turn off as well. So you could have something where if you were doing something, not too stressful with the CPU, for argument's sake, you could literally turn the fans off and have it running, we'll say semi-passive, because there'll be no active air inside. You'll just be keeping the CPU cool. I can see that being a good thing, and the fact that all the LEDs go off as well will mean that it's going to get, dark. It will suit that type of late night go to sleep environment. But I think that's quite a niche sector, and I don't know many people out there that are going to want to completely disable their fans. Turn the lights off for a film or something like that, yes. And maybe you don't need a lot of airflow to watch a film, yes. But I'm still not entirely sure I would want to completely disable all of the airflow in my case based on that header. So I think it would have been nicer if there was a way to just turn the lights off and still have some control over the fans. I also think that the hub now, it's a little bit dated to not go with a PWM hub, because it would also be really nice to be able to connect that to your motherboard, whatever motherboard software that you're running, to be able to adjust fans, and set kind of speed limits and stuff like that. And I think it's a little bit, narrow-minded, short-sighted, however you'd like to put it, that you can just kind of go with that kind of option now. I do think we should be encouraging the market to push forward and get some decent fan control and getting everything linked up options going on as well. So I'm not going to say it's a deal breaker, but if I don't start saying it at some point, then, you know, it's never really going to get actioned in products later on. I've got a feeling I'm going to be saying it for a couple of years before anybody does really wake up, but you get the idea and where I'm trying to come from. But at the end of the day, it's a cracking looking case that you can get a decent amount of water cooling inside. With the fans and all that type of stuff, I would have to say in the end, personally, I would end up ripping the fans and that hub out and just setting them up with my own custom ones. You know, you can put different colours in there and stuff, but PWM now would be an absolute top item for me. I'm not going to mention any names, but you can think about the type of fans that you might want to put in. That's really it. I do really like it. There's a couple of things that, you know, I felt a bit disappointed with. There's a couple of things that actually wound me up, like that side plate clippy-on-y, cable-y, doofy, what's it. That was one of the things that actually wound me up. But it's a very positive thing. It's a very beautiful product. And I can't stress enough that it's really, I see this as being like the InWin 805 done right. So it's nice to see a bit of competition finally in the case market, but also it's actually nice to see something a little bit different as well. And when they deliver a case like this, when we know that glass isn't going to be particularly cheap, and it all comes in at that price of $129.99 of your Great British beer tokens, I think they've done pretty well. But for now at least, this is Tiny Tom Logan with the Aesthetics, Exceptional Aesthetics Award-winning Anidees Crystal case. That was a bit of a mouthful. Out.